Welcome into another episode of the Drum Candy Podcast. This is your host, Mike Tolson, the Chief Creative Officer for Drum Factory Direct. In this episode, we are talking with punk rock drummer Branden Steineckert. Branden is an American drummer, producer, composer, and entrepreneur, and he is currently a band member of the legendary punk group Rancid. In the early 2000s, Branden was a founding member and the drummer of the punk band The Used. In 2006, he took over drums with Rancid to do a tour and then subsequently became a full-time band member. To do the interview, I'm handing over the reins to my good friend, John Martinez. I've known John for many years. He's a big fan of the punk rock scene, the hardcore scene, the metal scene, so I thought he'd be a great person to do this interview. We first met when I was still at Modern Drummer, and he was doing some sales and artist relations for Pork Pie and Cadison and Turkish Cymbals. And then he started writing for me, doing the Gearing Up column for Modern Drummer for many years. So let's get to it. This is John Martinez interviewing Branden Steineckert.
So I wanted to kind of start with just like, when did you start drumming? When did that start for you?
I got what I would call a late start. I was about 15 years old, right around 16 in that area somewhere. Everybody in my family had taken music lessons of some sort growing up, except for me. I remember I lost my father to suicide, unfortunately, when I was 11. And we had a couple old photos of him. And I had always heard that he was a drummer. I never in my life saw him play drums or got to experience that. But I heard that, in his high school band and stuff, he played drums and that he, played Wipeout in front of the whole school and all this stuff. And so, like, I always heard these stories, and as a depressed, struggling teenager, I was skateboarding was my life, and I was in a pretty ugly house situation with my family where, my stepfather and stepsisters were quite abusive with my mom, and there was a lot of just ugly, heavy stuff going on. So I was a very depressed and otherwise like suicidal teenager. And then one day I found this photo of my father behind a drum kit, and he looked exactly like you would have thought it was a photo of me. Like, it was crazy.
Oh, wow.
And literally that one photo just inspired me to want to play drums and to try to take after him in a positive way, I ultimately, I didn't care. I had no, ambitions or like passions for music. I had discovered at that time, and I just started playing drums for that reason, but then instantly fell in love the moment I started jamming with friends and like actually playing, because it was really a frustrating, like, long learning curve for me. I felt like it didn't come naturally, and the basic coordination. I tried to take a couple drum lessons and lost interest because the sheet music just wasn't what I was in it for. It was like, I just want to hit drums and be like my dad, and right. It was like, so I really struggled with the patience of that learning curve, to just be able to find a groove. And one day it just kind of clicked, and jamming with other people. And I got this tremendous natural high out of it. And then next thing you know, we played a house party, and that was like the biggest high I'd ever experienced in my life, I've been sober and drug free my entire life.
Okay.
And my friends, like my skater crew, was like all starting to party more and more. And so the more they'd do that, the more I'd stay home and jam with a different crew of friends and play music. And really it gave me an outlet. It gave me, I would like sit there and hit my drums and scream and just play till I, be in tears. And like, it was just really an outlet for me, and like counseling, and then it started to groove, and I found a passion I never knew, and it literally took over my life. Like, it took over.
Yeah. The pounding kind of lets that out of you, right?
Right. And to just be able to like, I was always I've been a pacifist my whole life. I was never in fights growing up, things like that. But I was like a really angry kid, and I'd punch lockers and walls and just be like pissed off all the time and pretty much had like bloody knuckles through most of high school from just hitting things and just trying to take out this aggression. And that was until I started playing drums. And then it was like, it was incredible because I could hit things and do this like otherwise violent act without hurting myself, without hurting anybody else, and make something beautiful in the process, you know? And it was, something about that was just an incredible thing and empowering, and where it's, you know, the life lesson of literally like taking something bad and turning it into something beautiful, you know? And it's like, if you can take all that pain and all that terrible stuff you're feeling from life and channel it into something positive, you know, like that's a really special thing. And so I think that was a big part of what blossomed my love and life as a drummer, you know?
So it sounds like it became, dare I say, therapeutic for you?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, it was just, you know, with the cost of gear being the only cost to that therapy, it was great.
Yeah. I mean, would you just go through cymbals and drum heads and stuff? Or?
Oh yeah, but I wasn't able to replace anything. You know, I had the same pair of, like, my very first kit I worked my ass off to buy. I found on, like, you know, a Craigslist kind of thing or whatever, like just a local for sale thing. And some kid was selling a Vista, like a Ludwig Vista light, the classic blue, like, you know, and it was the 5-piece kit, 2 crashes and a ride and hi-hats, you know, for $500, and the hardware, all the stands. Okay. And so I worked my ass off and bought that kit, but the entire time I owned it, it still had the heads that it came with, you know, like I didn't change the heads a single time, you know, like, who's got the money to do that, right?
Well, I mean, sounds like they lasted for you, you know.
Luckily, I had the black dot heads on. No, they were the silver dot at the time. Those heads were on it, and luckily they took a beating. But I mean, I didn't know how to tune drums. I didn't know how to, you know, I was just playing, man. I was just in it for the therapy of it and for the high of it. And, you know, it's like I was an action sports kid where, like, you know, my older brother was almost pro riding BMX, and him and I, between him's BMX and my skateboarding, like, that was life, you know, and dabbling in some snowboarding on very cheap Kmart snowboards, hiking the foothills behind our house, you know, like, it was like these kind of action sports, so to speak, were my whole life. I was never into organized sports and things like that. So anything, you know, nothing with an authority in it, you know. I couldn't handle a coach. I couldn't handle a teacher. I couldn't handle, you know, I was this little angst-filled punker kid that just couldn't handle someone telling me what to do or that there's a right and wrong way to do it, you know. So
did you ever play that video game back in the day? What was it called? Like Skate or Die?
Oh yeah. Of course.
The ball.
Yeah, just a handful of friends that had it, but yeah, that shit was fun.
And really quick, where are you based out of right now?
So I'm from Utah, and have spent most of my entire life here, moving around tons, but pretty much within the state of Utah. Okay. I was born in Idaho, but I don't count that because we moved to Utah when I was, you know, a baby. And then lived in Colorado for a second. But currently I live in southern Utah. I'm near the Arizona border, right near a city called St. George, and just kind of enjoying the desert life a little more. I split my time between my hometown of Orem, Utah, where my previous band, The Used, was from. That was where we came up. And that city and area will always be home to me for sure. So I have a spot up there, and I just split my time between my 2 spots. So
yeah, sweet. But it's, you know, just kind of, you touched on a little bit of, you know, your recreation snowboarding and stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, you're in Utah. Don't they got some like prime, like powder or snow?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like,
and honestly, we kind of have prime everything if you're into outdoor recreation. Like we've got some incredible lakes. Our snow is next level. In the winter. Well, obviously, and our deserts, our mountains. I mean, we have incredible sand dunes, incredible mountains, and like it's just incredible. If you're into outdoors, there's a reason why this state's like population's practically doubled since 2020 because everyone's coming out here. So maybe I shouldn't talk it up so much. There's really nothing to do, nothing to see. Just keep passing on through. Make your way to Colorado. That's where it's all at.
They have the snow.
Right? Yeah.
So I first came to know you or your band or your music, your drumming from your years with the Used. But when did that start for you?
I started that band in 2001. We, from my very first band when I was 16 or whatever, it was one of those like constantly changing and evolving lineups and things like that. Eventually my first band, I changed the name and it was a different group of guys by then. And we did that. And then that was garbage and the lineup was changing. And then I changed the name of that band to Used, in late 2000. Okay. But it was a different lineup. It was totally different music. But one of our former band members who quit because he thought that we were holding him back, which is ironic because the band consisted of me, our guitarist, and who became the bass player of the Used. So everyone in the Used minus Bert, the singer, that band was those three guys plus this other guy playing bass, and he quit the band because he thought we were holding him back, and then we all went on to have careers. It was kind of a nice
yeah.
But he had like told a bunch of our close friends and people we loved how we had like used them and that we would use people and all this shit. It was really a slap in the face, when we were just like doing our best at the time. We were just trying to focus on our band. We were squatting and panhandling, and so to have him say that and have friends turn their back on us was really hurtful, and so I actually named the band Used to mock that whole situation and to mock that guy. And then, but it was kind of we had to come to terms with the fact that this band and what we were doing wasn't working. And the guy who became our bass player was actually singing for that band, but only because he was our friend. He wasn't a talented singer in any way. And so we had to come to terms with that and kind of be like, you should probably play bass and we should get a singer. And we know this, we knew Bert from our local scene and so on and so forth. And so when this whole change and all of that happened was like spring of 2001, when the lineup that was the Used came together, was like April 2001, somewhere around then.
Okay.
And then our writing, Quinn and I, our guitarist, really, really dove deep into the songwriting and kind of found a sound that didn't sound like anything we had heard. And we were in love with it and just found a groove and rolled with it,
Yeah. I thought your licks, on the, the first album, et cetera, your grooves were very, very cool,
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Or what was happening in the scene and like, incorporating like some of the, nuances of your drumming and like some of the ghost notes and stuff like
cool.
That. Just the, just bringing more of that sound out of your drums and having, just a very unique flavor,
Yeah. Cool. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I had a like.
yeah,
It was interesting because my previous bands, I think part of what made them so fun, but also so bad, was that we couldn't like land on what we wanted to do. We simply were playing the music we enjoyed to listen to,
yeah.
and we listened to a wild variety of music. So we would literally. I loved funk, and we'd play a lot of funk. And our old bass player was a slap bass player, and so like I loved the grooves, and just like I could jam funk with anybody all day and be stoked. Like I love playing funk music, and so it was like we loved pop music. We loved like I guess what you'd call new metal, or whatever we were calling it in the late '90s, early 2000s, and
Right.
and then it's like, but I loved hardcore, and I especially loved punk rock, and so it was like every song we wrote was like, and this is our punk song, this is our ska song,
Yeah.
this is our funky song, this is our metal song, and it was just like it was fun, and we had a blast, and the kids that came to our shows, we always pulled in like 200 people or something to our shows, and all these different bands I had, and it was never a shortage of a good time, but it wasn't good music. Like it wasn't, it was just simply fun, but it wasn't like great songwriting by any means. And so that was the thing, is I think we came to the realization one day that it was like, rather than emulating our influences, we simply need to let them influence us and just do whatever we do. And so that's where like I have like kind of what I would consider like funk grooves to some of these songs. And I do a lot of hi-hat stuff, and just, some just what I would call kind of grooves in a song that when we were just writing it, the guitar part maybe was like, seemed like it would call for something pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. But I would take that like kind of funk element or some of those different, I loved a lot of drummers that would utilize the whole kit and toms and beats that weren't just simply hi-hat and snare kind of thing, or ride and snare. And so I loved incorporating the whole kit into the beats, not just fills, you know, and so it just kind of, the mix of just kind of these like guitar, our guitarist was getting really into like Radiohead at the time and stuff, and like just getting like really like, and he was getting more and more into like the kind of, I guess, emo music, and I was more into like the punk rock and the rock and stuff like that. So kind of where our worlds met was a really interesting and fun kind of crossroads. And that was that's what I hear in the music, is it's like you hear people that love pop, you hear people that love all these kinds of music, but yet we weren't trying to just be one of those specific bands, know. And so it kind of worked,
Yeah. So let's fast forward from that time frame, and then you join Rancid.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a wild chain of events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did when you join a new band, but how did you change up your approach to, your music from your previous band to Rancid?
I think the biggest thing was, there were a couple of factors that came into play, but a big one was taking a back seat, like with the Used, I helped create that sound, and it was an evolution of my bands, and the guitarist and I really wrote all the music together. And this is like, I joined one of my favorite bands. Their sound was very like established. And so it was kind of like, I had to take the approach. I remember when this all went down and I joined the band, and especially when we started writing, as a huge Rancid fan and as a friend of Brett Reed, the founding and original drummer of Rancid, he's still a friend of mine today. And I have nothing but respect for him and appreciation for what he's done in this band. And he's a legend, you know, and the songs he wrote with this band are legendary. And so, I was taking the approach of like, all right, I'm gutted to know that Brett is no longer in Rancid. And if some guy came in and just overplayed the shit out of these songs and was overly flashy or overly whatever and just trying to like, you know, call a bunch of attention to himself, I'd be really bummed as a fan. You know, it's like, that's not what I'm in it for. Like, I want to hear Rancid, and I don't want to hear someone having a talent attack over these songs I love or messing up the sound, you know? And so it was really, I mean, I've been in the band 19, 20 years now. Almost, 19. And it's always been kind of to me, showing respect and paying tribute to the band I loved more than like jumping in and getting my hands dirty. Like, all right, I've got some ideas, you know what I mean? And it's like, I do have some ideas, but those need to remain on the shelf because those ideas might not be what sounds like Rancid. And while I love a band that evolves and continues to change, I have to respect what this band was when I joined. And I need to put myself and my ego, you know, in the back seat and do what is necessary for the band and the sound. And so, you know, I do play a much more simple type of drumming now. It's a lot more simplified and, you know, it's like we've got our ska songs, our fast hardcore songs, our mid-tempo songs, you know, and it's like, these guys like enjoy that I could do like some faster hi-hat and some faster tempos. And so, they'll roll with that a lot of the time, and we'll toy with things that they hadn't done as much in the past. And, but you know, for the most part, it's a matter of like, I mean, I'm an equal member of the band where everybody's very respectful in that way, that everyone's opinion's just as important. And, you know, but it's a matter of like respecting the band I'm in and knowing, you know, the sound. And I didn't want to just show up and butcher that and change it just so I could look cool. You know what I mean? Cause I'd rather the band look cool than me look cool. You know what I mean?
Yes. I just heard a statement. I think it was like a Metallica interview, and they were talking about Jason. So I don't want to butcher this whole thing, but you know, they were saying that when Jason came into the band for Metallica, right, that he was very much a fan, and like they wanted him to not be the fan, but be a bass player of Metallica, something like that. And like be the bass player.
Yeah.
Cut loose, like whatever like Cliff used to do. So I was just wondering if that was almost, you know, kind of a situation that you would have been in, but you were saying that you had to put your ego, you know, in the back seat. But I think you were touching on that a little bit about that they liked when you did some of the hi-hat stuff or whatever it was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know,
well, it was one of those things where like, it was writing a line, you know what I mean? Because I did feel like it was important to use my voice, to use my talents and be me. I have to be true to me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But there is a gray area in there where I can 100% be myself and be me, but also work within parameters that are fitting for the band. And as a producer, as a songwriter, as these many, you know, seats I like to fill, that's not a tall order for me. You know what I mean? In the way that like, I know even in the Used, it was like, I know when a song might just need kick drum through the whole song or might need a really simple beat because that's what's best for the song. Right. And that it's not always about, you know, how impressive can I get with this? You know, I'm not actually into that kind of drumming at all. Like, I prefer what I refer to as like songwriter drummers more than flashy drummers. You know, I'm not impressed by notes. I'm impressed by creativity and songwriting, you know? And so it was nice where like, it kind of fit perfectly in the way that the day we jammed for the first time, you know, like I got a little snippet of the story of me joining the band was they were leaving for a tour for the UK in like 5 days. And it was like a 3.5 week sold out tour. And that was when their drummer quit. So they had only a few days. They called me up, asked if I would do the tour. In tears, I said, of course, you know what I mean? Because I had lost my job with my band 2 months earlier to the day for the fact that I was a sober guy and I've lived a sober lifestyle, and they wanted somebody that would party with them. And I lost my job due to my sobriety, which was heartbreaking. Without going into all that tons that I'm fine with talking about, but for the point I'm trying to make, so I had like 3 days to learn like 25 songs. I walk into this like little jam room in LA. My drums have already been shipped to England. And the guys walk in and give me a hug. And then they're just like, let's play Roots Radical, which is a Rancid song I've, you know, known forever and been listening to forever. And I'm just nervous as hell. We play the song and whatever. And then it goes great. They're like laughing and stoked and like all just smiles. And I was like, all right, okay. They seem stoked, like cool. You know, and I played it pretty much like the record, you know, but just was like in the pocket with the guys. Matt Freeman, our bass player, is one of the greatest bass players on the planet, if not the greatest in my opinion. But like, so to get to play with him is incredible. And then they were like, all right, let's try a fast song, you know? And so I'm like, all right, like, like, here we go, you know? And the song they wanted to do is called It's Quite All Right. And I love this song. But on the record, it didn't have a whole lot going on as far as fills, you know, just some kind of run down the stairs, you know, going in and out of chorus kind of thing. And there wasn't much to it, but I knew the vocal. I knew what everybody's parts were. I knew this song by heart. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to play this like me, you know? And so played the beat and everything, but there's just this, you know, the vocal ends on the verse and you got to like, you know, a couple measures and before that downbeat of the chorus hits. So I filled those measures with kind of a longer fill that was very me. And then like every time there was these breaks in the vocals coming in and out of the choruses, I just threw some fun fills in that I felt like were Rancid, but nothing you've heard Rancid do. And we finished that song. It was like a 90-second song or something, you know, like it's not much, but we finished and they're just like laughing. They're like, oh my God. And like, they're like, that's how that's supposed to sound. And like, they were so stoked. And then they said, let's take a break. And we take a break. We go outside. They're all talking and doing their thing. I'm sitting at this picnic table. They all walk up and sit down and ask if I'd join the band permanently and be a full quarter member. And I was like, oh shit. So after my second song with them, they asked me to join the band. And I felt like that was like a good example of like, all right, I know the part, I know what to play, but there's also room for me to be me in it. And that's what they loved so much. And, you know, here we are 19 years later.
Yeah. I was waiting for you to say, they turned around, they gave you a look, and there was like, yeah, don't do that again.
Yeah, they're like, cut this shit, dude.
Right. I think we've heard stories about that with like other musicians. Like one of the stories was like Sting telling, you know, Josh Freese in like, I don't know what song it was, like Message in a Bottle or Roxanne. Like Sting asking Josh Freese to not play the tom part. You know, on the backbeats, and Josh was like, "That's part of the song. That's the song."
Yeah,
you know? Yeah. That's what the song is. We can't take that out. You know what I mean? Right. So it's kind of like, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it was one of those things. Like I was stoked. Where I think they seemed to have complete trust in me, and they did at the time. They did before we even jammed. You know, because to put this tour in my hands with only a couple days, you know, they were already showing the trust in me, and that meant a lot. And I think there's a very mutual respect where, you know, they respect me and my playing and my songwriting, my approach, my production, things like that. And they also know that I know this band as well as they do, you know, and so it's been good. The dynamic and the chemistry have always been kind of no brainer. I've never once been told what to do or what not to do by these guys.
Wow.
And I think that's just because we all, you know, it's a simple thing when you respect where each other are coming from, and no one in this band tells each other how to do their job, you know, and that's nice where it's not I'm open to criticism and riffing ideas all day, you know, but it's also another thing if someone's being a dictator and telling everybody what to do and not to do. Like that's no fun, you know? So I love the freedom, and I love that they've, you know, always from day one let me just be me, you know? So it's been great.
It's rad. So, how did your drum setup change? Let's say from the used over into, Rancid. What was your setup approach for your drums?
You know, there wasn't massive differences. I mean, I started out like kind of just a little, someone that like didn't know any better. You know, when I was first drumming, I remember when I sold that Vistalite kit, I sold it to buy a 6-piece Thomas Star Classic that I still have today. So I just, you know, I had like 2 rack toms and 2 floor toms and had a like cage thing, rack, whatever. Yeah. And I loved that, but then it was like, all right, this is kind of overkill. Like pretty quickly, it was like, I don't need this shit. Like, and so I ditched that second rack tom, you know, moved my ride over to that position, and it was just the single rack and the 2 floors. And then it was like, all right, ditch the rack thing. I don't need the cage, like, you know, and so then it was just kind of like all of that was happening basically as I was starting to use, where I stripped it down to just rack tom, 2 floors. Okay. I think we might have even had a second rack tom when I made the record. We did actually, just because that's what I was used to playing. And in that process, it was like, I don't use that 13-inch. Like, I don't need that, you know? And so ever since I ditched that, like really the biggest difference, I've always had a China on my right. I've loved that since like early drumming. That was like one of the first cymbals I bought. Okay. Was one of the Zildjian Chinas. And then, you know, I've toyed with my cymbal setup, but I've been a Zildjian artist my whole career. So been with them for 23 years or whatever it's been. And then the biggest differences, I guess, would be, you know, I've always played single pedal kick drum. Okay. And there was a minute there, you know, I had like 2 splashes on each side of my hi-hat because I've, again, kind of bringing my little funk fantasy and some of that stuff I really enjoyed. And then I used to play with like an 808 trigger pad just to hit those low end, you know, downbeats on some of the used songs and places that we had an 808 on the record, you know. And man, that was really, those 3 tiny elements are the only things that went away when I joined Rancid. Okay. You know, like I would use a little side 10-inch snare. Okay. I did that with the used on our, like, from when we made our In Love and Death record, and through that whole tour cycle and everything up until the end, I always had a side 10-inch snare, and I've even still brought that back on a few Rancid tours. Just that I would use almost like, you know, some dynamic parts, other times as like almost a timbali kind of vibe. But it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, I don't need that. It's fun to have the extra drum, but I kind of want to try toying with that floor tom over there. But you know, again, with the Rancid beats, everything's pretty basic. So it's just not really call for a bunch of stuff. It's really just whatever seems like it'd be more fun to play. You know, it's like, oh, I want to try this. You know, I'll try some different effects symbols now and then. But really it's kind of the same setup as I had in the used, minus the splashes and 808. Not a whole lot of use for those in Rancid.
Okay. So what sizes are you using what for your kit right now with like
I've been like a 12, 14, 16 tom setup forever. And 14-inch snares, 18 by 22 kick, like, so like pretty basic. I've gotten pretty shallow on my rack tom, just because I like it. It's almost more of a position thing.
Okay.
Where I like it lower and a little bit over the kick drum, and I like the way that it allowed me to get that in places that a deeper drum couldn't get without being 10 inches above my snare.
Is it like a fast tom, like a 7?
I want to say it might be like an 8. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I've always loved big cymbals. It's been like a 1920 or 2021. I even used to, in the used for a while, I was using I believe a 21-inch ride as my right crash, and a 20-inch crash on my left, and like a 23-inch ride. And I just loved the big cymbals. With Rancid, I changed that up that little bit, but I believe I'm just a 19 and 20, and then still like a 23-inch ride. As long as, I'm always picking the rides based on what the notes can cut through when I want them to, and the bell can cut through, but also be able to just crash and wail on the thing and get a nice sound that just doesn't sound like, just chaos, and yeah, but really it's all been fairly basic, love me a 7.5 by 14 snare. I love I've loved metal snares. So I really try to get metal snares as often as I can. However, we came up with the guys at SJC were great about, we'd toy with some like silly ideas or something wacky for like a finish on the drum that would end up needing to be like printed on a wrap or whatever it may be, some kind of wrap finish.
Okay.
But I was always torn where I was like, man, but I love the sound of a metal drum, but you can't do as much with it, cosmetically. And so for a minute there, they had an idea that I loved where they would do a carbon fiber wrap on the inside of my snares. Okay. And it was surprising the tones we could get, and it sounded awesome. Like I've used that in so many recordings now. And it's crazy the tones it gets. It's awesome. It's an incredible snare.
What was the tribute for?
Well, so a buddy of mine he was like a world-renowned rally car racer and entrepreneur. He had started DC Shoes, and then went on to have a career as a rally car racer. His name was Ken Block. And so he was actually alive and well at the time, and it was one to just celebrate him and his work. And we made one for both him and I that looked like the livery of one of his rally cars.
Okay.
And then it just, he unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. And so since has taken on a whole new, special kind of tribute, rather than just celebrating, him at the time. Now it celebrates him in an even greater capacity, unfortunately. But it's one of my favorite drums to this day. I actually just retired it. Because we had used it on so much stuff and so many tours, and some of the hardware was getting pretty beat down. And rather than swapping out all the, tube lugs and things, I was just like, I want to let this one sit. So it's here on display in my house now, actually.
Okay. So speaking of retiring drums in that, are you a collector? How vast is your arsenal, your drum gear?
I'm a instrument collector.
Okay.
In the way of I love snare drums, and I love I have quite a few kits, but they're all my kits. Like I haven't ran out and bought like collector's one, like vintage stuff, things like that. There was a moment I had like a vintage Ludwig kit that I bought for a music video for the Used.
Okay.
And the people I bought it from didn't actually get get it to me in time. So we weren't able to use it, and I just hung on to it for years, but ended up letting go of that. And so all the drums I have, all the kits are from my career.
Okay.
I'm actually going to be selling a couple of those. I'm doing a reverb store later this year, and going to be selling some pretty awesome, some cool stuff. But yeah, I've always loved, I things become sentimental to me easily, and I don't want to let them go, but then you start to get an abundance of things, and you're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be a hoarder. Where's the line between collecting and hoarding? But I mean, I'm obsessed with guitars. I end up buying and getting way too many guitars, so I'm selling a handful of my guitars and stuff because for how mediocre of a guitarist I have way too many guitars. So
Well, what kind of guitars are they? I mean, are you a Fender guy or a Gibson guy, or
really everything's kind of 50-50 between Fender and Gibson, Love Fender. I'm a sucker for a Les Paul. I'm a sucker for a Les Paul Junior. And so I have mostly Les Paul Juniors and Les Pauls with a bunch of Fender options. And then, but I have a studio and I have a studio set at each spot. Where I'm at now is more just my rehearsal studio at this house. Okay. And then I've got a little more proper studio set up at my other spot. That's what I call Unknown Studios, and has been where I've done a lot of producing work and things over the years. And, I remember early into my career, our manager we had with the Used told me something that has stuck with me. And he was just like, it's never a waste of money buying gear. It's never a waste of money. So that stuck with me, and maybe a little more than it should have. Yeah. But I've also, heard people talk about, and I like the idea that every instrument has a song within it waiting to come out, and every space, has a song in it waiting to be created, and so I think there's some romance to that idea. And I like the idea that if nothing more, I think when you get a new piece of gear, it gets you excited and it makes you pick it up and play it. If it's a new snare, you just stoked to just dig in and play with the sounds and all this stuff. And if it gets you playing more and new ideas come from that, then yeah, there's truth to it. There's a song waiting to come to life from that instrument. If having a new guitar, a new bass or whatever inspires you to pick it up that much more because it's exciting, then there's that much more chance you're going to write something awesome with it, So I think there's some truth to it in a more literal breakdown where if it inspires you to pick it up more, then something is going to come of it. But either way, I think snare drums and guitars are what I've collected the most. And yeah, I'm a sucker for it.
So are you saying it's okay for a drummer to play other instruments?
Right? We're not just the guys that hang out with musicians.
Yeah.
I love I wish I would have taken music lessons growing up. Everybody played piano and trumpet and things like that in my household except for me. And I grew up with a piano we had this little janky upright in our house growing up, and I never touched the thing. And I kicked myself for that because it's man, the years wasted that I could have been learning piano, which to me is one of my favorite instruments because it's that perfect mix of a rhythm instrument and a melodic instrument and everything. The coordination, everything. It's all in one, and I absolutely love it. And it's one of the most vibey instruments to me. Like if someone's going to sit down and just play one instrument in your house, I think that's the most appealing to hear them sit down and play, as opposed to, unfortunately, we play a pretty ugly instrument in the way of like, no one's vibing out, just hanging around in the living room, and while someone's in the corner playing a drum set and bashing beats, like, we're not really creating a vibe, so to speak. As like, if someone that knows what they're doing on a piano, it's just like, dude, like, are you kidding? Like, it takes you somewhere, know? Yeah. So I'm a sucker for these instruments, and I'm a sucker for like, it's, like I said, like I love the songwriting aspect of everything we do, and I just love songwriting. I love producing. I'm big into arrangements and things like that. So it's like anything that just helps the creative juices keep flowing and keeps that unlocked, because I do believe it's a muscle, and we got to keep working that muscle, you know? So.
Well, you touched on something that I was one of my bullet points that I did want to, cover for you, but your Unknown Studios.
Oh yeah.
Or you correct me if did I say it correctly? Or
yeah, that's correct.
So tell us about that.
So when I was toward the end of my time in the Used, I really started becoming passionate about producing and wanted to produce more and more. And what I loved was the idea of discovering new bands and trying to help work with them and develop them in a sense of like, I didn't work for a label. I didn't have like a sure thing in with anyone. But I had experience that if I could share what I've learned over the years with bands. And so my whole thing was, like I didn't charge these bands. I just loved to, I started buying recording gear at my old house and started working with friends or musicians that were exciting, and it was like, I don't want your money. Like, I'll record a few songs for free on my own dime and time. And then sure, if we can get you a record deal or something like that, then I can get compensated for my time after the fact or whatever, but this wasn't like a business venture. It was just an outlet for me, and I just kept investing more money into the gear. And then, by the time there were things coming out, it was like, I had to, make it a proper LLC and start like a business, know? And so, but I was never like a studio for hire kind of thing. It was like, we're not talking, I wasn't building out the rooms to be just like acoustically treated and incredible, it was nothing like that. This was a home studio vibe, but I just started dumping a lot of money into the gear and getting some proper outboard gear and things like that. And then, so I had called it Unknown Studios, got a band, a record deal and things like that. And then around then was when I joined Rancid, and we actually wrote and did all the demos for the very first Rancid album I was on. We did all of that at Unknown Studios at my house. It was exciting. It was really fun to like, bring the guys in Rancid to Orem, Utah, and for 3 weeks and write a record together, it was like crazy snowstorms and, like having to drive in 4-wheel drives to get to a restaurant for dinner and, and come back and just jam in my basement, and it was awesome, done some really cool things there. And so that's what I've been, I moved out of that house in 2019. That's when I moved down south. Okay. And I took that studio apart, put everything in storage with the intention of building a new home up there and doing a much more elaborate studio. But that was when COVID hit and everything got crazy. Wow. And had to pull the plug on that plan. And then ever since then, like I said, Utah doubled in population and the price of everything went crazy. And so the original plan was no longer a realistic one. So it was kind of like, all right, new plan, and pivoted. And I bought a second place up there and, spent months with the guy finishing the basement and building out some rooms that I could use as a studio without going too overboard as like full on recording studio,
Yeah.
And I'm just now like at the final, like got everything set up and dialed in, and like a dope rehearsal set up in the live room, and all the gear set up, and I'm stoked. But that's where trimming the fat and updated a lot of gear, and upgraded, and so that's where again tying into me doing a reverb store later this year. A lot of that gear that we used on those Rancid recordings and stuff like that, I'm going to be parting with. So it'll be cool. It'll be fun for fans that are gearheads,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you mentioned, your evolution of that, your studio into an LLC.
Uh-huh.
You also started another business.
Yeah. I like to stay busy for to say the least. I'm a very passionate. I get really into the things that I do and my hobbies. For a minute there, Lars, our guitarist, took me to my very first American soccer game, and we went to my first match in 2017. Fell in love with soccer and my hometown team, Real Salt Lake. And then next thing you know, I'm like, me and our goalkeeper hit it off, and next thing you know, me and the whole team we're all hanging out all the time, and the coaching staff, and just became friends with everybody. And I've got Real Salt Lake tattoos, and I wrote the anthem for the team, and it's just like I don't get into anything half-assed, you know what I mean? So it's like that was just from one game Lars took me to.
All in.
And, yeah, you know what I mean? And so now, fast forward and in 2020, we're kind of like everybody looking for something to do, and saw these pickleball courts. First thought they were tennis courts, and it was like, the hell are these, and look into it and stuff. And it's it was starting to kind of get a little traction, but went and bought these just cheap ass paddles. And Danielle and I went and played, and we were instantly hooked. It was so fun. And that was right at the time that I was building the house I'm in now. And so I would shuffled my blueprints around and did some work with my lot layout and managed to fit a professional sized pickleball court on my property.
Yeah.
And so of course I had to have my own court because I played one time. You know what I mean? I had literally played one time and put a court in at my house. That is the most me thing to do, Yeah. And so, and which might I add is really good that I've never drank or done drugs in my life, because as you can see, I may have a problem.
Right.
I'd own my own, I'd probably be in jail or something, or dead, but, or I'd own my own liquor company or something right now. But,
no.
But so,
since you don't drink, I mean, a lot of these other bands that I've seen some of their side hustles is they're doing they're roasting coffee beans. So making coffee roast.
Yeah. Right.
And it's okay.
Yeah. The coffee thing really blew up, which ironically, I've actually never had coffee in my life either.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Which is, people assume, I'm from Utah. So the assumption people just jump to right away is a Mormon thing or a religious thing. And it was nothing like that for me at all.
Okay.
I'm an agnostic person. I was raised in Mormon. My family was Mormon, but none of that to me had anything to do with that. It was just always, for me, it was early on, I was 11, not to, kind of get off course, but when I was 11, my and not long after my father had passed, and no, I was 12, and 11 when he passed, but when I was 12, my best friend at the time was dropping acid and doing drugs and shit, and we were 12 years old, and it was just I've always been this like high energy, enthusiastic person. And so I just didn't need that to have a good time. And
Yeah.
with all the rough stuff happening at home and all of that, it was like, well, I certainly don't need this to potentially add to my depression
Yeah.
and anxieties and or nor do I want them to be what take me out of them, because I wanted to handle that shit head on, and and then even the coffee thing, like when I was 8, my best friend at the time, his mom would smoke like cheap cigarettes and make cheap coffee and all in the house. And I'd go play at his house and it just fucking stunk so bad, like cheap cigarettes and coffee. And it was just like, it just made it a big turnoff to me where I was like, that smell, like, no. And so for me, so long, I didn't have it just because the smell grossed me out.
Okay.
And now I don't mind it at all. Like all of that stuff, cigarettes and coffee, it all just smells like tour to me. So I'm like,
Sure.
it's like, no, I don't, no judgment. Like, hey, do what you want. Just for me, no, thank you. You know what I mean? So it's always been kind of a to each their own. But anyway, so getting back on the other thing,
you played once.
Yep.
And then you instill or build a pickleball court.
Right. And then we start playing like quite a bit. We're having tons of fun and turning our friends onto it and family, and people are coming over and we're introducing them to the game and just playing it and watching other people get hooked. But I had to go out and like, I need some proper like gear if I own my own court. So before the court was even done, I started like shopping for paddles and stuff. And it was just like, selections, there were plenty to choose from, but everything was just the same. Everything looked the same. And I started thinking, like, man, I need like a cooler pickleball paddle company, and then it's just like this void like pops in my head that I'm like, man, we're really missing out on this, and it started becoming one of those things like, all right, if no one else is going to do it, I'll do it, like, and so sure enough, on like January 2023, like I dabbled into it in 22, done some research and stuff. That's how long this idea was stewing and growing. And then finally in like January 23, I pulled the trigger and started Ghost Pickleball and my own pickleball paddle company. And I just incorporate the elements of, influences in my life from street art and there's one creeping in. I see it. There it is.
Let's do an unzipping live.
Yep. Let's see.
Kind of live.
Show yourself. Oh,
that's killer.
Thank you. We took elements, like skateboarding, the major part of my life, it's street culture, street art, all this, and then everything from like the designer world to music and everything in between. And so we just kind of merged. I say we, but it's a very DIY thing. It's just me. But I have had some great contributors with a couple friends, and my girl and my some good friends of mine that live next door to me. People that really helped me out. So I have a proper website and people that post my photos and all that stuff. And like one of my buddies that was helping contribute with some design ideas in the beginning. And it's been great, but it's literally like when people order stuff, I'm in there boxing it up, and I really take pride in it and how it's boxed and the presentation and the quality and everything, but it's been a really fun, like passion project where it's like, again, one of those kind of silly, like I get into something, I get really into it, but it's also been a lot of fun and something that's very different, than all of the other creative outlets. And this just kind of gets me like playing games and exploring a new world, and hopefully start expanding more and more. We've done some awesome collaborations with, we did a Rancid paddle. We did a paddle with the Aquabats. I did 2 Green Day paddles.
Yeah.
I've got some really exciting others, some collaborations with bands this year coming up that I think is too soon to say, but those are in the works and awesome. I'm doing sports teams, and we've done a fundraiser paddle for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Oh, wow.
So, trying to do some good with it, trying to do some new things and keep it fun, most importantly.
Yeah.
It's got to be fun.
Mm-hmm. And for that foundation, also kind of spread awareness, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's obviously something very near and dear to my heart. That is an issue that affects everyone and doesn't discriminate. It's like all walks of life, and doesn't matter race, gender, sexual orientation, religious class, everything. Like, all of that's out the window when it comes to mental health and suicide prevention.
Yeah.
And so it's something that is just simply for the greater good, looking out for mankind, and human beings, and trying to just help spread some hope and some resources for people that I unfortunately know what that's like as a survivor, having lost my father to that, as well as someone that's stared down that ugly road myself, and luckily I'm still here, you know, so something that means a lot to me.
Well, while I have you here, and not to do a right turn, but how about what's the website for, do you have a website? Like your Unknown Studios, and then
I do. For the studio one is kind of like, I'm on social media just under my name, Branden Steineckert. Tricky spelling, Branden with an E, not an O. But I think if you punch in Branden, Branden, and an S, it's going to bring me up. But yeah, people can find me on there. Contact me. I love, I do a lot of studio drum work. I've done hired touring drum work. I'm off all year with Rancid and have a very open schedule for drum work. So always love doing that and collaborating with others and things like that. Otherwise, if people ever have any inquiries at all for me, they can reach me on social media is the best way. Then even like Ghost Pickleball, there's a Ghost Pickleball social media pages, and the website's just ghostpickleballshop.com, and people can check it out. And between the two, you'll definitely see what I'm up to for sure.
Okay. Now, are you not doing an Airbnb with your other place that has the pickleball court?
No,
studio.
Ironically, I put a pickleball court at both homes now because I have to. They both have the essentials. There's a mini ramp for skateboarding in the backyard of both, and a pickleball court. So bases are covered, and if you ever come over, we have skateboarding and pickleball, and plenty of instruments. So music, skateboarding, pickleball. I don't know what else you need.
I saw that on recently on like an Airbnb post, and it's like they were featuring like the pickleball court, and I'm like, dude, they're gonna tap into a whole, you get
that a lot where I live. There's every other nightly rental out here has pickleball courts. It's definitely become a thing, but I'm not one of them. I don't bother renting. I don't rent my home. So
fair enough.
Private pickleball courts, very much.
Yes,
that's the best part too.
So this is a drum podcast. So there was sorry,
no worries.
One of my cats knocked something over. But traditionally, we've always had this question for some of the guests, being, what was your first snare drum or drum set? I think you tapped into that drum set. Blue Ludwig.
The Vista Light.
Vista Light. Yeah.
Yeah. And it had the matching snare with it.
Okay.
And I loved it. I didn't know what I had till it was gone. You know what I mean? Like that thing had some miles on it. When I bought it, even some of the shells had visible cracks, you know, and so it was definitely like on its way out, but I would sure love to still have that kit. You know, that was my very first kit. But actually one time I was in Japan on tour and went into a music shop, and they had like a vintage Vista Light snare drum that looked exactly like mine, and so I bought that just because I still needed to have one, you know.
Okay.
So it's not my original, but I do have one that represents it for me.
That's it for this week's episode. Hope you enjoyed that conversation between John and Branden. If you do like the show, make sure you give us a 5-star rating, write some words in the review section in your podcast app, create some comments in the YouTube channel, share it on Facebook, all the stuff. Anything you can do to help spread this show to other drummers around the world, I'd be greatly appreciative. Until next week, have a good one. See you then.